Okay, so hello, and I'm very pleased to be with you. I'm Geva Shenkman, and I'm going to talk about LGBTQ plus parenting across the lifespan. So some of the points that I would like to focus on today. I would like to focus on what shapes parenthood aspirations, namely parenthood desires, intentions, and estimated likelihood among child-free LGB, lesbian, gay, bisexual individuals. I would like to focus on the transition to parenthood and to see what happens to the well-being of sexual minority individuals upon embarking to parenthood. And then I would like to see what is the unique role of fatherhood among older gay men. And if we will have a few minutes, maybe I will touch some critical points regarding the implication of working with sexual minority parent families. But before I will start and show you and present my findings, we should all acknowledge that we are living in a changing society. And today, more than ever before, LGBTQ plus individuals are becoming parents. And this is due to progression in legislation and in fertility technology. Today, more than ever before, gay men can use surrogacy services worldwide. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans individuals can use adoption or shared parenting. They can use IVF, in vitro fertilization, and all kinds of art-assisted reproductive technologies. This could not have been occurred 2 or 3 decades ago. So the world is changing, and also the research is changing. And I'm going to show you some findings from the last decade. Because I'm going to show you mainly findings from Israel, I would like to present some topics related to Israel, families, and sexual minorities. So nowadays, sexual minority in Israel can become parents via several pathways. Gay men can use surrogacy services nowadays in the boundaries of Israel, but this is something new because until 2 years ago, there was a clear discrimination against gay men, such that heterosexual couples were able to use surrogacy services within the boundaries of Israel, and gay men were only able to use surrogacy services outside of Israel. So if a gay guy wanted to become a parent, he had to use, for example, surrogacy services in the United States, which is something very complicated and expensive. But fortunately, this was changed after a very long debate in Israel. So nowadays, you can see also gay guys using surrogacy services in Israel. Gay men and lesbian women can also use shared parenting. A gay man can become a father via a shared parenting or a contract with a heterosexual or a lesbian woman. Lesbian women can use sperm donation quite easily in Israel and become mothers. And of course, there is the option of adoption. Nevertheless, adoption in general in Israel is quite rare. And of course, there is the oldest version that gay or lesbian individuals who are parents had become parents via previous heterosexual relationship. So these are the common pathways to become an LGBTQ plus parent in the Israeli society. More on Israel, because this is the socio-cultural climate of the studies. We should mention that in Israel, there is quite a progressive legislation regarding the rights of sexual minority individuals and especially sexual minority parents. because the legislation has changed and gay men now can use surrogacy and they can use adoption. And in general, sexual minority individuals succeeded to secure more than just basic rights. Nevertheless, same-sex marriage is not yet allowed in Israel. So if a gay guy or lesbian woman would like to get married, they usually will do it abroad. And then the Israeli country will have to accept this ruling. But till now, same-sex marriage is not legal within the boundaries of Israel. Moreover, the Israeli context is characterized by a patriarchal norm, and this is constantly reinforced by the warfare conditions that seems to never end in Israel. And this patriarchal environment is not a fertile ground for acceptance for sexual minority individuals. Moreover, the reliance of the Jewish religion on the biblical law that doesn't approve homosexuality clearly doesn't help for an accepting climate for sexual minority individuals. Also, the mandatory army service in Israel may pose sometimes difficulties for sexual minorities. Although since the 80s of last decade, being gay, lesbian, or trans doesn't exclude one from serving in the army. The army service sometimes may pose difficulties for sexual minorities who may be targeted for bullying or for some kind of discrimination. So as you can see, the Israeli context is quite confusing because there is a quite progressive legislation regarding sexual minority rights, but sometimes the climate is not accepting and maybe even homophobic. And these opposites norms or trends may pose difficulties for young sexual minority individuals who struggle to construct their identity. Because we are going to talk about LGBTQ plus parent families, I should also tell you that Israel is extremely pro-natalist country. It has the highest fertility rates of all OECD countries. So the mean number for children per family in Israel is around 3 children, which is almost double than most European countries. Also, Israel subsidizes many art-assisted reproductive technologies for all populations. So, for example, women in Israel for IVF, in vitro fertilization procedures, until the age of 45 with unlimited cycles. And this is something that you would not find in other places. And I think that it may be related to the fact that Israel is a very young country that was built after the Holocaust, and it is constantly under war condition. So baby boom is just a constant phase in Israel. So this is relevant because these pro-natal norms or these familistic values are internalized by everyone, regardless of sexual orientation. And you can see it, for example, in a specific study that we did, in which we have compared parenthood aspirations, namely parenting desires and parenting intentions, between LGB, lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals, alongside heterosexual individuals from 3 countries, from Israel, Portugal, and the UK. And we chose these countries because they are really different in the norms of collectivist or individualistic values, and also regarding familism and pronatalism. So, for example, Israel is extremely familistic and pronatalist, and the UK is extremely individualist. So, when we compared Parenthood Aspirations, we found that both heterosexual and LGBT individuals from Israel reported greater parenting desires and parenting intentions in comparison, for example, from LGBT and heterosexual individuals from the UK. Moreover, both LGBT and heterosexual individuals from Israel reported more concern of being childless in comparison to participants from the UK. So it does seem that the pronatal and familistic values are relevant for parenting desires and intentions, both for heterosexual and LGBT individuals. So I have mentioned, and I took the time to explain about the Israeli context because it is very relevant for the experiences of sexual minority individuals. So, for example, gay men who grew up in Israel and internalized the importance of child rearing and the importance of family, they would probably want extremely to become parents. However, when I'm asking them, what are the chances that you really will become parents? Then you see interesting results. So, for example, more than a decade ago, I've done a survey that asked 183 gay men regarding their parenting desires. And you can see that around 70% of them reported a very strong desire to be fathers. This is extremely high, by the way. At the same time, similar studies were conducted in the US and also in Italy. And in these surveys, the ratio was around 50%. So indeed, Israeli gay men really want to be fathers. But look what happened when I asked them, what are the chances that this would be realized? Then the chances decreased to around 31%. And as a psychologist, you know what happens when you have something that you really desire, but you estimate that it would be realized in very low ratio. So we found that the lower levels of estimated likelihood of parenthood, the low chances that one assesses that he will become parent, was associated with adverse mental health. You can see that lower levels of estimated likelihood of parenthood among gay men was associated with more depressive symptoms and with lower levels of satisfaction with life and with lower levels of positive emotions. So it does seem that parenthood aspirations is not just something about an extra something for sexual minority lives, but it has a real impact on the mental health of sexual minorities. So then we wanted to do a comparison also with heterosexual individuals. So in this specific study, we have sampled 449 participants and asked them regarding their estimated likelihood of parenthood. And as we hypothesized, lesbian and gay individuals reported lower levels of estimated likelihood of parenthood in comparison to heterosexual individuals. This is not surprising, and this is also in line with studies worldwide. And usually the reasoning for the gap in parenthood aspirations is that sexual minority individuals have to overcome legal barriers or financial barriers when wanting to become parents, which may lower their parenthood aspirations. And we should also acknowledge that heterosexual individuals usually face more pressure to become parents in comparison to sexual minority individuals. So our study just replicated findings that were also common in other countries. Moreover, we have found that in Israel, gay men reported the lowest level of estimated likelihood of parenthood, which is quite intuitive because at the time of the survey, gay men were not able to use surrogacy services within the boundaries of Israel, and their adoption opportunities are extremely restricted in Israel in general. And they probably acknowledged all the difficulties that they may have to overcome when wanting to become parents. So this is probably the reason why they had the lowest levels of estimated likelihood of parenthood. And in another study, we saw the same results when we assessed parenting desires. So again, lesbian and gay individuals in Israel reported lower levels of parenting desires in comparison to heterosexual counterparts. You can also see here in the table something about attachment avoidance, and I will address it in 5 minutes. So at the moment, some of the studies I'm showing you showed that there is a gap in parenthood aspirations between sexual minority and heterosexual individuals. And usually studies worldwide had several reasoning for this gap, which addressed the financial costs or the legal costs or the bureaucratic obstacles that sexual minority may have to overcome if they would like to become parents. But as a clinical psychologist, I was very much intrigued to explore whether there are some psychological variables that also may explain the differences in parenthood aspirations between the two populations. So in this specific study, I have chose to focus on a specific variable called anticipation of stigma upon parenthood. Anticipation of stigma upon parenthood refers to the assessment that one expect that family members or peers or society in general would think that it would be weird if he will become a parent, or that the society would think that he would be less fit parent. And as you can see in the figure, lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals in our sample reported greater levels of anticipation of stigma upon parenthood. But you can also see that anticipation of stigma upon parenthood was associated with decreased levels of parenting desires and parenting intentions. Moreover, this full mediation model. What does it mean? It means that if in the statistical analysis, I am controlling, I am deleting, eliminating the impact of the variable anticipation of stigma upon parenthood, the gap in parenting aspirations between sexual minority and heterosexual individuals diminishes. So for me, it was quite important because it does mean that if legislators or policymakers or society in general would work to eliminate the stigma that is being cast on sexual minority individuals regarding parenthood, then you would see that the gap in parenting aspirations between heterosexual and sexual minority individuals is diminished. So this mediation model actually started a sequence of several studies in which I explored the possible mediating role of other psychological factors that may explain differences in parenting aspirations between sexual minority and heterosexual individuals. So I've told you 5 minutes ago that I will address attachment avoidance. So you probably know attachment avoidance from the theory of Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, right? And its implication for young children. But Bowlby and also other researchers widened the theory also for adults. And nowadays we can address attachment orientation also for interaction in close relationships in adult individuals. And few years ago, there was a theoretical model that suggested that sexual minority individuals may present more attachment avoidance in comparison to heterosexual counterparts. Not because of their early early growing, but rather because they faced repetitive rejection from close family members or from peers, or they have to face discrimination. And these adverse circumstances may cause them to adopt a more vigilant approach to the world, which could manifest itself as attachment avoidant. So following this theoretical analytic model, we have done several empirical studies to see whether sexual minority individuals would indeed report more attachment avoidant. And unfortunately, this is what we found. We found that indeed lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals tend to report more attachment avoidant in comparison to heterosexual counterparts. Moreover, this seems to be relevant for parenthood desires, because if someone has elevated levels of attachment avoidant, he would probably be reluctant to be close to other people. He would be reluctant to rely on other people or to let them rely on him or hers. So indeed, and also in line with previous research, we found that attachment avoidant was associated with lower levels of parenthood desire. But more specifically, these mediation models show, like the previous model, that sexual minority individuals are reporting more attachment avoidant, which in turn associates with parenthood, with less parenting desires. And again, if we are controlling for the impact of attachment avoidant, then the gap in parenthood desires between the two populations diminishes. And this is also relevant for policymakers and legislators, because we are saying that attachment avoidant is probably caused because of the rejection and discrimination from family members and from society in general. So if we will be able to create a more accepting environment, we probably will have the ability to impact attachment avoidant and parenthood desires among sexual minority individuals. Lastly, in this topic of parenthood aspirations, we have explored the mediating role of two additional psychological variables. These variables are subjective traumatic outlook and interpersonal vulnerability. Subjective traumatic outlook is the subjective assessment that one has been traumatized. And as you know, you probably know from the DSM-5, in the criteria for PTSD, there is place for the subjective assessment and not just the objective trauma. So as you can see, we did find that sexual minority individuals reported more subjective traumatic outlook. You can also see that interpersonal vulnerability was also something that we checked. Interpersonal vulnerability in our study refers to the existential threats in the interpersonal domain. It is characterized by items like, I'm afraid I would not find love, or I'm afraid that someone I like would betray our relationship, or I'm alarmed how human cruelty could hurt me. So this is existential interpersonal vulnerability. And again, we found that sexual minority individuals reported greater levels of interpersonal vulnerability. Moreover, and in line with the suggested mediation models, you can see that both traumatic outlook and interpersonal vulnerability served as a mediator in explaining the gaps in parenting aspirations between sexual minority and heterosexual individuals. So maybe I will skip this one, but if I'm gonna just summarize some of the things that I've mentioned till now, we can say that sociocultural climate matters for parenthood aspirations, for heterosexual and for sexual minority individuals. We can also say that there is a gap in parenthood aspirations, namely desires, intentions, and estimated likelihood of parenthood between LGBT, lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals and heterosexual individuals. And additionally, we can say that we have pinpointed several variables that can explain the gaps in parenthood aspirations. Such variables include anticipation of stigma upon parenthood, attachment avoidance, interpersonal vulnerability, and traumatic outlook. And we have also mentioned that this has important implications for policymakers and legislators that could really work to minimize the stigma being cast on sexual minority individuals in the context of same-sex parenting. But let's talk about what happens when one succeeds to realize his or her desires to become parent. What happens when sexual minority individuals are becoming parents? So maybe we can start with heterosexual individuals. So among heterosexual individuals, and by the way, also among sexual minority individuals, being in a relationship, in a steady relationship, is usually associated with better well-being. These are the results from numerous studies worldwide. And it is commonly attributed to the fact that being in a steady relationship may provide emotional support and economical and social benefits for individuals, which in turn will result in increase in happiness or subjective well-being. This is quite intuitive, right? But let me ask you, what happens to heterosexual individuals once they are becoming parents? Does their happiness increase or decrease? Do you know? Do you have an idea? So this is interesting. Parents, in comparison to non-parents, to report lower levels of satisfaction with life, lower levels with satisfaction with friends. They are less satisfied with their marriage life, with their physical health. They tend to report to be less happy, more anxious, and more depressed. So these are the results. And these are the results, by the way, in several studies worldwide. But before you are doing anything dramatical, just wait a second. So if you would think about it, these results are reasonable because when you become a parent, you sleep less, you fight more with your partner, you probably have less sex, you are less confident with your body, you have more financial costs. So all these issues can manifest themselves in lower levels of subjective well-being or happiness. So we have to face it. This is something that happens. And we can ask ourselves, is this decline in happiness is permanent? When will it go back up? Why will it go back up? But this is not the scope of this specific lecture. So maybe in the future, we will talk about it. But I do want to say that these results of lower levels of happiness among young parents are not in line with the ancient wisdom that the kids are a prime source for happiness, right? And this is not in line with the messages in the media that idealizes the transition to parenthood. But I have promised this is not the whole picture. Indeed, the transition to parenthood is accompanied by a decrease in subjective well-being. Subjective well-being is the hedonic well-being or the immediate well-being. Once you become a parent, you do feel less positive emotions. You feel more negative emotions in general. And this may lower your subjective well-being. But happiness is not just hedonic well-being. Happiness is also, as Aristotle told us, is also eudaimonic well-being. This is also the meaning in life. And meaning in life, usually indicated by purpose in life or personal growth, commonly increases once becoming parent. So, if I'm going to summarize it, this is the parenthood paradox. When heterosexual individuals are becoming parents, they experience both decrease in subjective well-being and increase in meaning in life. So, more than a decade ago, I was very much intrigued to explore whether the parenthood paradox would exist also among gay fathers. And I hypothesized that it would not, because becoming a gay father is not a trivial task. It requires overcoming multiple hardships. You have to overcome financial hurdles, you have to overcome legal and bureaucratic hurdles, you have to overcome the social stigma that you may not be a good parent, you have to overcome the internalized stigma you may have. So after overcoming all these ordeals, one may have a sense of victory or a triumph that could manifest itself in elevated levels of both subjective well-being and meaning in life. So at least this was my hypothesis before we went to check it. And in this specific study, we have sampled 204 gay men. 45 of them identified themselves as fathers. And as you can see in the results here, gay fathers, in comparison to gay men who were not fathers, reported elevated levels of both satisfaction with life, positive emotions, general happiness, and purpose in life. So these results actually confirm the hypothesis that among gay fathers, you can see elevated levels of both hedonic and eudaimonic well-being, of both subjective well-being and meaning in life. So this was really intriguing and surprising, and maybe even provocative, because it does seem that the parenthood paradox may not exist among gay fathers, and the ancient wisdom that kids are a prime source for happiness gets reinforcement from a gay man sample, and commonly not from heterosexual individual sample. So this is interesting, and I was very much intrigued. And as a researcher, I thought maybe we did something wrong. We should do another study to see if we have similar results. So this is exactly what we did. We went to do another study. And in this study, we have also used a matched pair heterosexual group. It means that we have specifically built for the gay fathers group a comparison group that was similar to them in most sociodemographic variables, so that anyone would not say that maybe the results are associated with sociodemographic variables. Moreover, in this specific study, we gave more representation for the surrogacy paths that become more approachable or more in use in Israel. So again, you can see that gay fathers, in comparison to heterosexual fathers, reported greater levels on the self-anchoring scale, on the delighted terrible scale, on the general happiness scale, on the satisfaction with life scale. And all of these scales are the indicators for subjective well-being. So this study shows that indeed, gay dads are happier. So why am I so intrigued by these results? Most studies on sexual minority individuals are studies on sexual minority individuals who are child-free, who do not have children. And in these studies, you constantly will see that sexual minority individuals are reporting lower levels of well-being. They report more depressive symptoms, more anxiety, less happiness, less positive emotions, more suicidality, more PTSD. And here I am standing and I'm telling you, listen, there is a segment of population among the sexual minority individuals, for example, gay fathers, who tend to report better well-being or better mental health. So it does mean that parenthood among this population may serve as some kind of protective factor that better their well-being. So with this in mind, we have continued to do some other studies. So in another study, we have compared gay fathers who became fathers via surrogacy with gay fathers who became fathers via previous heterosexual relationship. And we have compared them to heterosexual fathers. Of course, we have controlled for all sociodemographic variables that may have caused differences between the groups. And as you can see, gay fathers through surrogacy, which represent the unique path of intentional and purposeful parenting. So gay fathers through surrogacy reported the greatest levels of life satisfaction and parenthood satisfaction. So again, we see some interesting results here. Interesting results about the protective role of parenthood among sexual minority individuals. Then we have focused on other variables that may be relevant for the experiences of gay fathers. So for example, we have checked the self-perceived parental role. Self-perceived parental role refers to the investment in the parental role, the competence in parental role, the satisfaction with being a parent, and with the ability to integrate the parental role with other roles that one may have in his life. As you can see, we have found a significant association between self-perceived parental role and meaning in life, as indicated by purpose in life or personal growth, only among gay fathers. And among heterosexual fathers, there were no associations between perceived parental role and meaning in life indicators. And our explanation is that for heterosexual individuals, parenthood is trivial. It's something that it's like a developmental task that they are doing. But for gay men, this is not a trivial task. This is something that they really desired and that they really worked for to achieve. So in their lives, the parental role has more impact on the indices of meaning in life. By the way, this is very relevant for heterosexual individuals. It does mean that if heterosexual individuals would look at parenthood as an intentional and purposeful task and not as a trivial task that people do, they may have more psychological benefits from being parent. We have not neglected lesbian mothers, of course, because I've talked quite a lot on gay fathers. So, for example, we have looked at lesbian mothers in comparison to heterosexual mothers and focused specifically on basic need satisfaction in the relationship. Basic need satisfaction in relationship refers to the assessment that one does regarding how much his psychological needs of relatedness, autonomy, and competence in the relationship is being fulfilled. And as you can see, like the results among gay fathers, we have detected that only among lesbian mothers there was an association between more basic need satisfaction in the relationship and more personal growth. So again, it may pinpoint the unique role of lesbian motherhood and how you may see the strength in sexual minority parent families. In another study that we did more recently, we have also detected that among lesbian mothers who became mothers via sperm donation, in comparison to heterosexual parents that became parents via ART, assisted reproductive technologies, lesbian mothers reported lower levels of depressive symptomatology and greater levels of life satisfaction. And again, like in the studies on gay fathers, this is unique because most studies worldwide on sexual minority individuals, or specifically on lesbians, that does not have children would show you that they tend to report greater depressive symptomatology and lower life satisfaction. And our results that focus on lesbian mothers shows the opposite. Lesbian mothers report lower levels of depressive symptomatology and greater levels of life satisfaction. So at this point, usually people are stopping me and say, well, this is quite convincing. Yes, the parents are okay. We understand, and we understand that parenthood for gay men or lesbian women is maybe a protective factor. But what about the children? Are the children okay? Wouldn't they suffer if they grew up in a family that doesn't have a mother and a father? And this is maybe the time to stop and say that studies worldwide show quite explicitly that children who grow up in same-gender parent families are no different from those being raised by heterosexual parents on various cognitive and affective measures, as well as in regard to the development of their sexual orientation. Child adjustment is usually unrelated to parent sexual orientation or conception method. This is the results that we see in number of very important studies worldwide. Some studies even show better results for children being raised by same-sex parents. So, for example, some studies may suggest the children being raised by same-gender parent families will show better ability to express emotions, or they would show less stereotypical gender role perceptions. And I can also tell you that in a study that we did just last year, in which we compared three groups of parents. We compared lesbian mothers who became mothers via sperm donation with gay fathers who became fathers via surrogacy, and heterosexual parents who became parents using ART, assisted reproductive technologies. And we asked all the parents to rate the externalizing problem of their child. The child had to be in the age range of 3 to 10 and without any disability. And as you can see in our results, both lesbian mothers and gay fathers reported that their children had lower levels of externalizing problems, lower levels of behavioral problems in comparison to the children in the heterosexual parent families. So the children are okay. Most studies would show that there are no differences between the groups. And sometimes if there are differences, they are maybe even better for the sexual minority group. So till now, I gave you a glimpse into the studies of Parenthood Aspirations and to the unique role of parenthood for young parents. But I would like to take 5 minutes to talk about the unique population of older gay men. So older gay individuals grew up before pivotal events. They grew up before the Stonewall riots in New York. They grew up before the removal of homosexuality from the DSM. So they probably have endured a very strong stigma for so many years. Moreover, those older gay men grew up before surrogacy services or adoption opportunities were available for gay men, or before same-sex marriage was available for them. So their odds of being in a steady relationship or being a parent are quite low. So for me as a clinician, it is really interesting to see what characterized older gay men who did become parents. So we did several studies, but I will talk about 2 studies that I think are interesting. In the first, we have compared older gay who had become fathers through previous heterosexual relationship. We compared them to gay men that were not fathers. You can see that the age range is similar. It's around 60 years old. And we also compared them to heterosexual fathers in the same age range. And we have found that older gay fathers, in comparison to the other groups, reported greater levels of meaning in life. And we try to understand why would older gay fathers report elevated levels of meaning in life as indicated by purpose in life and personal growth. And one of the explanations that we suggest is that older gay men that participated in our sample had to identify themselves as 6 on the Kinsey scale. 6 on the Kinsey scale refers to exclusively gay. But we also know that the gay fathers in our sample, they all became fathers via previous heterosexual relationship. So they probably had to undergo a very unique coming out process to their wives, to their children, to their wide families, to the society. And this unique process may be associated with a construction of meaning to their life, which may explain the elevated levels of purpose in life and personal growth in this specific group. In another study, we have specifically looked at older gay men that were fathers in comparison to older gay men who were not fathers. And we looked at both hedonic and eudaimonic well-being. We looked also on the subjective well-being measures alongside the meaning in life one. And as you can see, we found that older gay fathers, in comparison to older gay men who were not fathers, reported both elevated levels of subjective well-being and meaning in life. So it does seem that parenthood serve as a protective factor for young parents and also for older gay men. So let's summarize what we have talked about here today. We have talked about parenthood aspirations, namely parenthood desires, intentions, and estimated likelihood of parenthood among sexual minority individuals. And we have compared their parenthood aspirations to those of heterosexual individuals and detected a gap. Then we had pinpointed some variables that can explain these gaps in parenthood aspirations between the two groups. And we have mentioned that this is relevant for policymakers that should work to eliminate the stigma being cast on sexual minorities regarding their parenthood. Because if the stigma would reduce, maybe the parenthood aspiration gap will also be reduced. Then we looked at findings regarding same-sex parenting. And I suggested that parenthood seems to serve as a protective factor, bettering the mental health and well-being of sexual minority individuals, because it suggests that unlike findings from studies on childless sexual minority individuals, in our studies, we show that LG parents report better well-being and mental health. And again, this is extremely relevant for policymakers and for legislators who should really work to ease the access for parenthood in all societies, because then it would help sexual minority individuals to become parents and possibly buffer the potential adverse effect of minority stress. So these are the main findings, but I do want to take one moment just for mentioning some implications for clinicians who work with sexual minority parent families. I do believe that most clinicians, as well as I, were educated on psychoanalytic theories. And these psychoanalytic theories usually assume that family is constructed by a mother, a father, and a child. But when we are working with same-sex parent families, we have to adjust these theories. Because if you would think about it, the Oedipus complex, the primal sin, the good enough mother, etc., are all concepts assuming that there is a mother and a father. But what would you say if there is a father and a father, or a mother and a mother, or just a mother, or just a father? So I would definitely suggest to re-examine these concepts and maybe to redefine them. And some theorists, like Stephen Mitchell or relational theory, suggested some alterations to these concepts. And you can also see in my specific paper, my suggestion. But if I want to be quite short, I would just say that we have to disconnect the automatic link that so many of us do between gender and psychological functions, because it does seem from the theories that nurturing or containment or holding or empathy are associated with being the mother, and posing boundaries or supporting the mother is associated with the father. But we should disconnect these associations because, of course, via psychological processes such as internalization or empathy, of course, that men can exercise containment or holding or nurturing, vice versa. So maybe this is something to think about when we are working with same-sex parent families. I want to thank you for listening, and I also want to thank some of the funds that I got through the years to do this research. So thank you for listening, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.